or migrants that are undocumented, the election of convicted felon Donald Trump could not come in a worse time. He has promised the mass deportation of 11 million undocumented immigrants on day one, and now has the backing of the Senate and the judicial branch to back him up. In Texas, we have Senate Bill 4 in the wings, which racially profiles and says that police can check your immigration status whenever they want. DACA kids or the Dreamers may now have no protection from being deported. And the convicted felon plans to use the Alien Deportation Act of 1798, a wartime statute that's only been used 3 times in the history of this country. One of those times was to inter Japanese Americans and Italian Americans and German Americans in camps in the U.S. We talked to Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, an immigration attorney in Texas.
Well, I think the federal courts, a lot of the federal judges have been put in place by him, and so I think that we're less dependent upon the court as a check against conservative executive power. What I mean is that I don't feel confident that, certainly, an unconstitutional act or an overreach by the president would necessarily be blocked by the federal courts, as I used to feel. It used to feel like that's a check within the governmental structure that we can count on, and I don't think that that exists. So what this would look like is, according to Trump's promise, immediately after taking office, his major focus is going to be detention, apprehension, detention, immediate deportation of undocumented people in the interior of the United States, and that he will be detaining and deporting these people without any due process rights. So no right to an attorney, no right to go before a judge, no right to defend themselves or fight their cases or appeal decisions. And Trump has said the authority that he'll use to do this action without due process rights is something called the Alien Invasion Act, which is it's an old law from the 1700s that grants this level of authority to a president in time of war to take these actions against nationals of the country with which we are at war. So in all likelihood, a federal court, you would expect a federal court to say, wait a minute, we're not at war with these countries, these migrants from Venezuela, from Cuba, from Mexico. We're not at war with their countries. The president can't use the Alien Invasion Act. But first of all, it would take a period of time for that, to get to that point in federal court, after which many families have already been impacted. And second of all, we don't know how a federal judge would decide on a case like that really anymore. So I think it's possible that Trump could effectuate a mass deportation plan without due process rights. And it is really scary. It is really upsetting. It would be very impactful in a negative way to our economy. It would result in the separation of families. All of the things that those of us who are paying attention are worried about, I think, are real concerns. We have, cause for concern.
And they're using the one thing they also brought up is we're fighting the cartels and we're fighting Venezuelan gangs, which is the same misnomer they used years past when MS-13 was the boogeyman, and now it's Venezuelan gangs, and it seems like before that it was Mexican cartel gangs, and so it seems like it's always a boogeyman to try to scare people into trying to get these things passed.
Well, it's a boogeyman, and it also, the argument writes itself. So Trump wants to use the Alien Invasion Act. The counter-argument to that is, wait a minute, we're not at war with the nation of Mexico or the nation of Venezuela, so you can't arrest nationals from those countries under the Alien Invasion Act. And then their counter-argument is, well, we are at war with the gangs or the cartels of Mexico or Venezuela, and many of these cartels or these, organized criminal organizations are de facto governmental entities in these countries. So, it's like I see how this argument's going to play out. It's another reason why I don't feel confident that we can trust that, oh, he's going to do this and then he'll get blocked and that'll be the end of that. No, I mean, I think we should contemplate a reality where Trump has access to the resources. There's a $100 billion Department of Homeland Security annual budget. He has access to the armed forces, the National Guard. He'll have the support of conservative Republican governors and legislatures in states like Texas. He'll have conservative federal judges who want to support his actions. And it is within the realm of possibility that a mass interior deportation plan actually occurs. And so I think we have to prepare for what that might look like. And what I'm doing as an immigration lawyer is I'm telling immigrants or people who know them to, the first step is consult with an immigration lawyer, not a notario, not a friend, not a neighbor. Go to an immigration lawyer who knows what they're doing. Talk to them about your case, your history. Find out if you can get yourself in legal status. And then we can worry about the other stuff. But for the people who are undocumented, they've been undocumented for years, they're married, you know, they have children born here, and they haven't consulted with an immigration lawyer, that is what they all need to be doing today, is picking up the phone and making a consultation.
What about the DACA kids, the Dreamers?
And the Dreamers are on the line too. I mean, DACA is that case is caught up in federal court. That program is very, likely going to be revoked. Congress, of course, is fully Republican at this point. Sometimes historically, Republican Congress will pass pro-immigration legislation, like during the Reagan era, during the Clinton era, but those are different eras. We're not in a time where Republicans are interested in expanding immigration or anything that looks like pro-immigration, even something that seems as obvious as permanent status for the Dreamers. It seems like such a no-brainer, but we're not in a rational era of legislation. And so is it possible that the Dreamers completely lose DACA and then there's nothing? Yes, that's possible.
We know that immigration has been going, illegal crossings has been down. We know that the border crisis was being taken care of. But Trump was able to use that and put fear into people that this is the biggest crisis that we ever had in history.
Yeah. I mean, this has been a really powerful tool for conservative candidates, including Trump, to really drive fear, hate, passion in voters, donations, and actual votes at the end of the day. I mean, immigration was the number one issue in this campaign, and that's because there's been this rhetoric of danger, invasion, problem, surge at the border, and that language has been so constant, so loud, so prevalent, whereas the language on the other side, the conversations that, you and I have, where this isn't actually real, the border is not porous, the border is fortified, we have strength, we need immigrants, like that language has been quiet. And the leaders of our country, including Biden, haven't been as loud, in my opinion, as they have needed to be with the counterpoints about why immigration is not our biggest problem. And, that's been a failure of the Democratic Party, in my opinion, is they didn't talk loudly enough about why immigration is not the problem. And the results speak for themselves.
And we don't talk about the billions of dollars actually spent by Governor Abbott, Texas Governor Abbott, on National Guards being posted down at the border, doing practically nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's $10 billion in Operation Lone Star and, almost no apprehensions. But, of course, now we're only going to see that kind of stuff ratcheted up, assuming that Abbott and Trump, hold true on their campaign promises. Then that's what we're going to see, more money more resources aimed at the border, aimed at immigrants in the interior of the country. That's what they've promised they're going to do.
What happens with the things like SB4? I know SB4 is in the courts right now, but they had a rush of court cases or something that the things that were passed by the Texas legislature that were targeted at Latinos, especially SB4, which was if you're a Latino or even close, you can be stopped and ask for documentation. Where stuff like that stand?
So SB4 is a law that essentially deputizes state law enforcement, police and judges, to detain, charge, and deport people who have entered the country illegally. So it turns the state into a deportation enforcement agency. And that creates jurisdictional problems between the state and the feds because, for example, let's say an immigrant who has a pending asylum claim and they're in immigration court, they get pulled over by, a police officer in Texas, and then a state judge orders them deported. Well, but they're before a federal judge, and so that creates obvious constitutional jurisdictional issues, which is why that law was placed on hold. It's under injunction. It's currently under review with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it's possible that it will move forward. And so, we're just in limbo on SB4.
What about some of the other laws that they've been passing in Texas? Target Latinos especially, that you can be pulled if I'm driving around and the person I'm driving around happens to be a Latino or immigrant, so to speak. A police officer can drag me to jail just as much as they can drag that person I'm driving around to jail.
Right, you're referencing the statute that penalizes alien smuggling in the state of Texas, and so that's if somebody, I forget the actual language of the legislation, the crime, but if you support or help an immigrant abscond in the state of Texas, then you can be charged with a crime. And so the concern, of course, is what if you're driving with your buddy down the road and you don't know anything about this person's status? Could you get pulled over and get arrested for commission of a crime? I mean, maybe. Yes, maybe. I don't think that has happened, but it's possible.
Wow. Kate, well, I'll leave it at that. It's for immigrants, and especially, it's a dangerous time. But you're recommending that people that have immigration status, that don't know their status, to look to talk to an immigration lawyer.
Yes, that is the strongest message that can go out right now. Is if someone is undocumented or they have a temporary status like TPS or parole or a work permit or just something that is not a green card, it's not citizenship. Everyone in that bucket needs to be consulting themselves directly with a lawyer. Don't just listen to the news. Don't decide this or that or the other thing because your friend told you so. I mean, that's the thing that I hear more often than not from people. People spend an entire decade under the belief that they aren't eligible for legal status in the country because they heard some story on Telemundo someday 10 years ago, and they've wasted a decade of their life because they didn't ever take the step to consult directly with a lawyer. So anyone with temporary status or no status at all needs to take the action to see if they can get legal status in this country right now.
That takes money, and I would think.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's nonprofits that provide legal services. There's a lot of good nonprofits that provide legal services for low-income immigrants. I'm a private attorney, so I do charge for my services. However, I'm right now offering free consultations to people. So if someone wants to call my firm, I can give the number if you want. We can do a virtual appointment with anybody in the country just to explore what options they have. Would you like me to share the number?
Sure.
Okay. It's 512-599-8500, and we take WhatsApp messages, text messages, or phone calls.
That was Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, an immigration attorney in Texas.